Welcome to the Sports NextDoor Podcast. My name is Owen, and I'm joined today by my virtual neighbor, Max. How's it going, buddy?
Pretty well. Yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. Had some interesting games in the NFL yesterday, and obviously coming off of UFC 255, I'm sure you're riding a bit of a high yourself.
Yeah, it was a great Saturday night. I hope your Sunday went as well.
Yeah, not too bad. Jump right into it. To start the Sunday, NFL Sunday, we had a couple of snooze fests. Overall, the first half, those unders were hitting like crazy. But the first game that I really want to talk about, and obviously I'm only one man, so I can't be watching all the games at once. The game that I was watching, Tennessee Titans, Baltimore Ravens. Titans pulled out an overtime win, 30-24. And this game had some really interesting implications for the AFC playoff picture because Baltimore was picked at the beginning of the season. Lamar Jackson, reigning MVP, he's been running all over the place, and it seems like teams really have them figured out at this point. Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator for the Ravens, had a great system last year. And like a couple weeks ago, Lamar Jackson was interviewed saying that teams were starting to call their plays out before they were running them. And so they've now lost 3 in a row, or they've lost 2 in a row, and they play Pittsburgh next week on Thanksgiving. And obviously the Steelers are undefeated, so that's not looking good for them. And with this AFC playoff picture being so crowded, I mean, it's like the Ravens, who are basically up there with the Chiefs, 1A, 1B, are now at risk of missing the playoffs. And the big reason for that was Derrick Henry, Tractorcito, as some may call him in Mexico, but he had a great day on the ground. And for the most part, he was just huffing and puffing, carrying 3 dudes for 4 yards at a time. And then overtime came, and like, I can't even imagine being a Ravens D lineman and stepping up in the hole and just having to get hit in the face, hit in the mouth, like over and over by this unit of a man, Derrick Henry. And so in overtime, tie game, Henry gets the ball, rips off a 30-yard touchdown run to walk it off when they were already in field goal range. But at that point, the Ravens are just lining up and saying, please don't run the ball. It hurts so much. So that was something great to see. I also have in fantasy, so pretty good day for me. That was kind of my big early morning game that I really enjoyed. The other games in the slate, Eagles-Browns. Browns get a defensive touchdown and then essentially just run the ball the entire game. Carson Wentz, yikes. I think like the Eagles are in trouble here, and they probably should be looking for what the future of the quarterback position is. Because, I mean, since his MVP-like season way back in 2016, Carson Wentz, like, he doesn't know what he's doing out there on the field anymore. And so the Browns, believe it or not, are 7-3 on the season and could make the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. So there's some excitement there in Cleveland. Next game, Lions-Panthers. Panthers shut out the Lions, which is wild because normally Matthew Stafford, like, he's on his way to the Hall of Fame. He lights it up in the air, but just they couldn't get anything going. Texans beat the Patriots 27-20. Deshaun Watson basically does it all. I mean, he's struggled this year because they've failed to protect him properly, but I mean, when he has a little bit of time, he can make magical things happen. I think people have forgotten how exciting he is as a player because of DeAndre Hopkins getting traded in the offseason to the Arizona Cardinals, and he's a big part of that offense. But like, he had a play today where it was goal to go, and he like scrambled and then just ran through a safety for a touchdown, which you don't see that often from the quarterback. So it's really electric to see. Other early games. What's up?
I was going to ask, is that like such a high impact turning point moment in the game, or was it still back and forth after that, or did that kind of help seal it?
Well, it was back and forth all game. The Patriots are never going to be out of any game with Bill Belichick coaching. But just like when you have your quarterback make a big time play like that, where they're being physical, where it's usually a position that's not asked to be super physical, it really gets that like offensive line. It really gets your offense fired up. It gets your defense fired up because you know he's willing to go out there and really sacrifice his body to make a big play for the team. And then moving on, New Orleans, just the dominant defensive performance against the Atlanta Falcons, and Taysom Hill in his very first career start gets a win, as Drew Brees is currently sidelined with basically every rib in his body being broken, which is not great to see. But the Saints finally get a little bit of a preview about what life is probably going to be like for the next couple of seasons after Brees retires, most likely at the end of this season. Big storyline out of Washington, Cincinnati. Washington wins, but number 1 overall pick, Joe Burrow, torn ACL. He's done for the rest of the season. And that's a tough one for the league because, I mean, you knew something was going to happen because Cincinnati's just, their O-line's been horrific all season. But, of course, he ended up getting injured on a play that really didn't involve much contact. And so that's a really tough one for the league to see. But, I mean, he was already on Twitter saying he was going to be back better than ever next season. And, I mean, he'll get some time to heal the rest of his body, which has been beaten to a pulp by opposing defensive lines. Next game is Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. I mean, coming into this game, Mike Tomlin's Steelers usually have trouble getting up for weaker opponents, as we saw last week when they played or 2 weeks ago when they played the Cowboys. But no problems this time. Their defense is totally dominant. 4 interceptions and a little bit of CanCon. Chase Claypool getting his 10th. Yeah. Canadian Chase Claypool getting his 10th touchdown in 10 games. He's a rookie. And a lot of comparisons to Megatron, Calvin Johnson. So it's just nice to see. We haven't really had like a Canadian superstar in the NFL, but he seems to have the makings of one, at least. The thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers is they just seem to draft wide receiver ones every year. So he's got to split a lot of the catches with Deontay Johnson, James Washington, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner coming out of the backfield. So it's impressive that he's been able to put up the level of production that he has. Moving on, we had the afternoon slate, which was a little bit more exciting, featured some up-and-coming young quarterbacks. But Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins actually had a tough game today, which I'm not complaining about as a Broncos fan. And the Broncos were able to pull that one out. Finally, Pat Shurmur's learning how to run an offense. The Broncos just cannot, like Drew Lock is still not at that level where he's good at reading defenses. Second drive of the game, throws a pick. He's thrown 3 picks in the 2 previous games. So they really needed a nice rushing attack, and they got it. And then their defense really stepped up and stymied Tua Tagovailoa, who that was probably the best defense he played so far in terms of performance. And I mean, yeah, it's a great win for the Broncos and really kind of dashed a bit of Miami's hopes for winning the division as they drop pretty decently behind the Buffalo Bills, but they're still in contention for that wild card spot. And then the other afternoon game, the Jets, Chargers. I mean, the Jets are 0-10, and they've basically, my betting strategy every week this year has been to just bet against the Jets. But I saw something this week. I knew that it's basically like an 0-10 team versus a team that is just known for blowing leads. And so I knew the Jets were going to lose, but I knew they were going to cover the point spread. And so that's where I put my money, and it paid off. Chargers won by 6, and they were favored by 9.5, which is bizarre. And in that game, Keenan Allen had a franchise record 16 receptions, which is amazing to see from him because he doesn't get a lot of recognition that those other top wide receivers do. And then the game that I was watching, Cowboys, Vikings, not the greatest matchup for this season, but two historic franchises. And it was nice to see that the Cowboys finally managed to get a win without Dak Prescott as the starting quarterback, and just a brutal showing by the Vikings defense. But I think that bye week really paid off for the Cowboys. And if you look at the NFC East, currently every team in that division has only 3 wins through 11 weeks. But the Eagles sit in first place with a record of 3-6-1. So that tie right now is what's separating the division lead, which is just so embarrassing. That division is a dumpster fire. And then the last afternoon game, Green Bay, Indianapolis, went to overtime, which was nice because we got football all the way up until the Sunday night game started. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling fumbling in overtime, leading to a Colts field goal to walk it off. I really thought Aaron Rodgers had some magic, but it's not to be. And that's a tough loss for the Packers because they were really trying to vie for that number 1 seed in the NFC and get that. There's only one bye this year. So that would have been really important for them. But they missed out on that, and the Colts maintained their hold on the AFC South, as the Titans also won this week. And that brings us to our Sunday Night Football. I mean, what can you really say about Patrick Mahomes? I mean, he's the MVP. He's on pace to be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And you just know, like, the Raiders scored to go up by 4 with a minute and a half left in the game, and the Chiefs only had 1 timeout, and it was like, that's way too much time. And the Chiefs go down, it seems, easily and score with 15 seconds left. Travis Kelce is somehow wide open in the end zone, and Patrick Mahomes, like, he is, at this point in his career, he's now had 40 career starts, most passing yards, most passing touchdowns, most 4 touchdown games, best passer rating, like, of all time at this point in their career. So it's just like, he is a special talent, which sucks because he's in my Broncos division until the end of time. But he's fun to watch, and that's why I took him in fantasy, because I knew the Broncos weren't going to be that great this year. Yeah, so that's kind of the big picture of the NFL this week. Always a lot going on Sundays, but some really interesting games, some really interesting outcomes, but not too much really changed in terms of the playoff picture on either side. Yeah, just, I mean, looking forward for Turkey Week coming up this week. Thursday, we got a bunch of games, and then it'll mean less games on Sunday, but more to cover on Friday when we get there.
All right, let's move on to the UFC, because I'm sure I just blathered on about football for a bit there. But let's, I guess, Max, walk me through some of your key takeaways from the Saturday's card.
Yeah, my turn to blather. Man, you really never know what you're going to get with all sports. Like, you look at some games and you think it's going to be so hype, so intense. You think sports matchups are a science and the inputs are going to guarantee an amazing output, and you're dead wrong. And sometimes you look at the inputs, the matchups, and you have like no hope or no optimism about it, and you're like, holy shit, that was awesome. And overall, this card was bottom to top to bottom, didn't look particularly appealing, like, relative to some of the stuff they've put on this year, but it was a pretty standout card, and I enjoyed it from start to finish. So the start, I was actually hanging out with my family while we were ordering Thai food and waiting for that to show up, and I just had the laptop on because I knew it was going to be 5 hours. I didn't know who and either of the fighters' first or second fight were, so I just planned on keeping an eye on it. And then 60 seconds in, the boys just started swinging, and I completely zoned out my family. So it was a guy who was 7-0 and had debuted on Dana White's Contender Series, which is a new thing they've been doing for they're on the 4th season now, where they have 2 promising fighters match up. They have about 5 fights a night, and they usually give 1 or 2 contracts out to fighters who look like they're UFC caliber. So this guy was 6-0 going in. He was fighting like an 11-4 fighter, I think. And he had the fastest finish in Contender Series history. I think it was a little over a minute. So they gave him the contract, and he was a minus 450 favorite to win this fight against a guy they signed. Let's be honest, they signed this guy for Cosce, the alum from the Contender Series, to make an impact, make a splash. And that's what he came to do. He showed up, he started swinging, and the guy Palatnikov had 2 knockout losses, so he wasn't known for having like an unbeatable iron chin or anything. And he took some shots and he weathered them, and it produced one of the craziest first rounds I've seen this year. Cosce was just swinging for the fences on him again and again. He dropped him at one point. I thought it might be over, but he didn't quite have the accuracy. And Palatnikov was able to get up. He had showed some really great footwork. He just kept jabbing him, putting pressure. And that kind of set the tone of the fight. They both exhausted themselves. It was a crazy first round, like, again, round of the year, I think. But you could kind of tell when the second round started that Cosce was the more tired of the two, because he was still trying to swing, but he was landing a lot less. And Palatnikov was still swinging hard, but he was a little more technical. His jab kept him a little more poised. He'd shown more patience, although he had been like throwing some wild flying knees and that sort of fun stuff. The second round went on, so I would have given Cosce the first round for sure. Palatnikov took the second round, and then the third round, it was kind of who wants it more? What have you got left in the tank? Because you both look like you've emptied the gas. And the story continued. Palatnikov kept putting some technical jabbing pressure on him, backed him against the fence, timed a nice right hand that it didn't make him drop, but he looked hurt. 2 seconds later, he took a really bad takedown attempt. Palatnikov sprawled beautifully and showed one of the more interesting finishes I've ever seen. He had the guy sprawled on the ground on top, and he just started throwing these wild looping hooks at him, like again and again and again, not very hard, but just accurate. And Cosce I've never seen this before. He was on the ground, like kind of almost in downward dog position. Yeah. And his head was just going left, right. And I don't know, it's like one of those physics things where the ball just goes back and forth. Yeah. Palatnikov just touch. It was certainly not intelligent defense, and the ref made the right call to stoppage. So that took home Fight of the Night awards, well deserved. Both walked home with $50,000, and it was a great way to start off the card.
Nice. Now, so Palatnikov, is he a relatively newer fighter then?
See, I have a problem with the matchmaking, actually, because both of them were making their UFC debut. Okay. Palatnikov had never fought in the UFC before. Okay. And I think the whole idea behind the Contenders series is that they're signing like not just UFC caliber, but like high level UFC caliber guys who are you expect guys who get the contract on the Contender series to, in their first 4 fights, like I'd say go 3-1. And that was kind of after the first season. That was the trend we saw. The guy who fought in the main event actually was an alum from that, and he had a great start. Like, I think he only had 1 loss in his UFC career up to that point. Sean O'Malley's probably the most recognizable name, who similarly had a great start to the UFC before he lost his last fight, but it was to a top 15 guy. But that's kind of what you're looking for, like guys who are going to have a real chance at cracking the top 15. So,
so you think that's Palatnikov's ceiling? Like, do you think he has a shot?
No. See, I'm upset with the matchmaking, because I don't think you should sign a guy who you're saying we think he's UFC caliber, and then for his first fight put him against a guy who's never fought in the UFC. The thing is, the Contender series has actually really taken off. I mean, UFC only puts out like content once a week on most weeks, 35 weeks a year. So if you can add like 8 weeks of Tuesday content, that's actually gone really well for them and like made some interest. But to have that, you've got to give out more contracts to keep the interest, keep the hype going. So this kind of matchmaking is kind of a consequence of the success of the Contender Series, and I kind of expect to see more of it. Which, I mean, they're in the welterweight division, which is one of the deepest, if not the deepest division in the UFC. You could make an argument for 4 divisions, I'd say, and it's one of them. So they were both great fighters, and I was really impressed by Palatnikov, but let's see you get a win against a guy with another win in the UFC before we start talking about his ceiling.
Fair enough.
The next fight was, again, a guy making his UFC debut, except this time he was doing it against Alan Jouban, a longtime UFC vet who's kind of been 500 style fighter, like win some, lose some. And a lot of that's a consequence of his counter-striking style, where he does his best not to get hit and doesn't throw enough to really decisively win rounds. Even if he is out technically striking him, he's getting pressured and the striking is so close it's hard to call. And that was his last fight, which was about a year and a half ago, I think, split decision loss. And from the second he started his walk-in, he was hyping himself up. Like, he was shouting, he was happy, he was moving, he was letting his emotions go. And I think that was the right mental approach. They talked in the walkout about his son being of an age where he's actually going to remember watching his dad fight. That might have been what got to Jouban, because he took more risks. He's normally a kickboxing guy who counter strikes like that, but he threw hands and he didn't always wait to be second throwing hands. He was first, and that was kind of how the fight went for him. He took the first round nicely by just being a little faster, a little more crisp on his punches, where Gooden was throwing some looping punches that were missing. But then, to Gooden's credit, he started tightening those up. And the one thing I think he did best was Jouban was landing some nice body, had leg kicks, but he wasn't really throwing them after strikes. He was just throwing them open. And Gooden started timing the jab really nice. It was a southpaw orthodox, which means typically the jab doesn't land quite as well as like orthodox, but if you're going to land it, timing like a front kick is a great way to do it. And I saw him do that 3 or 4 times. So he brought it back to a 50-50 fight. He landed a really good shot on Jouban in the second round. And then Jouban turned it right back up. He just stayed in it. He took his punches and started throwing better, hurt him even more. It looked like he might finish him for a sec, but like, nice job by Gooden hanging in. We went into the third round, and same story, no huge punch. And then it might have been my favorite ending to a fight I've seen in a while. There was about 40 seconds left, and Jouban, he pulled guard, hopped onto a guillotine. And this is what we talk about when we say like he's a real veteran. Like, normally when pulling guard for a guillotine is one of the stupidest things you can do, because almost everyone can defend a guillotine unless you're a really, really good jiu-jitsu specialist, which Jouban's not. He's great at jiu-jitsu. He'd tap either one of us out in about 20 seconds, but against the guy who's been training hard, he's not the sort of guy who can pull that off. But he looked at the clock, he had 40 seconds left, and you could tell he went, hey, I can hang on to this guillotine for 40 seconds. And you saw it. He looked up at the clock from the guillotine and he started shouting, giving her and giving her and giving her. He was putting everything. I love no crowds, because you can actually hear what the corner's saying. They were communicating. They're like, hey, you can do this. You got 40 seconds. Let's go. And he's like, all right. I know I got 30 seconds. He was shouting. He was screaming. Joe Rogan was calling it and saying like, he's not doing this or right to get the guillotine. I'm a bit skeptical. But like, willpower just took him above that barrier. Like, he put everything into that squeeze, and he did it at the perfect time. And he got him rolling the right way. He got him mounted for the guillotine, which is where you want to be to finish. And unfortunately, the round ended, but I think 5-10 seconds left, and he would have actually made him tap out. And he took the first 2 rounds, and the third round was close. So I would have given it to him, but like, ending the fight like that might have been the best example I've ever seen of like what they call a veteran move. It was awesome.
Yeah, the lack of crowds has been really bizarre. Like last night on Sunday Night Football, Raiders and Chiefs, like you could hear everything Derek Carr was saying at the line of scrimmage. Like every audible, you could hear Patrick Mahomes with his Kermit the Frog voice going, alert, alert, alert. Like you could hear Derek Carr like pointing out like, oh, this guy's coming in right here. And like it was really cool to hear because someone actually broke it down. What I heard was some of his audibles, he'd be like, James Harden. And so like any left-handed basketball player, you know he's flipping the run to the left side.
Right.
Which I feel like is too easy to be an audible. But at the same time, I don't know how much basketball knowledge the defense has. And in the game, that might not click right away, right? But what if you're throwing out, like, Luke Kennard is the other example that I heard. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
is he right-handed? Is he left-handed? I don't know.
You're guessing that's the code. Maybe they're guessing you're going to guess that's the code, and it actually means something else. So
too much inception.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fun game to play, and that can go really badly or really well for you if you want to make your game plan off of guessing code words. But yeah, no, I love no crowds. I mean, especially with MMA, they're almost always way too quick to start booing, which just it changes the fight. When guys hear a crowd booing, you have to have pretty strong willpower and determination to not let that get to you. So and it's interesting because fighters can hear what the other corner is saying to the fighter too. So it's a really interesting dynamic. I mean, it's not here to stay, but I'm going to enjoy it as long as it lasts.
Yeah.
All right, we'll start running through it a little more quickly now.
Tell me about this. Tell me about this. I don't know. When I was doing a brief look over at this card, I saw like one of the winners of the fight was Shevchenko. So walk me through that one.
So we had the Shevchenko sisters fighting, actually. So there's Valentina, who we'll get to later, who's the current flyweight champion and pound for pound, one of the most dominant fighters in the world, or in her division for sure. And then we've got her older sister, Antonina, who it just raises questions. When you have someone as amazing as Valentina, it's how good's her sister then, who has a Muay Thai striking background. And up till now, the answer was like pretty good striker, but big holes in her grappling. That she'd lost 2 fights so far in the UFC, and the first one was close, but the most recent one was not close at all. She got absolutely dominated on the mat and just didn't. It was a huge hole in her game, and it looked like that was going to prevent her from really rising. And anytime she faced a grappler, that was going to be a huge issue. Now, she was fighting a striker tonight, so I was expecting a striking match, but somewhere in the first couple minutes, it got up against the fence into some clinch work, which a Muay Thai background is a huge base for clinch work. So that already gave Antonina like a good opportunity, but then she started throwing a judo trip in there, and she got the better of the grappling exchange and took the first round based off that. And then she knew it. She went right back to it in the second round, struck a little, found her moment to make a trip, and this time got a more dominant position quickly, and really impressed with her top control grappling, which is not something she's trained most of her life. So she just stayed on top. She looked for submissions. She followed with the hips whenever Lipski tried to escape, and she eventually got to a position, kind of a side back mount, where she just kept throwing punches, and eventually the ref stopped it. It was really impressive to see someone get really badly outworked on the ground and then clearly go work on that and demonstrate that in her fight. So I'm excited to see what's next for her. This next fight was kind of impossible not to watch because Buckley had what might have been the greatest KO in terms of aesthetic value in martial arts history. I don't know if you saw it. He threw a body kick. Yeah. The kick got caught, which is a normal thing to do.
Like crazy.
He jumped, spun backwards, and knocked the guy out. Which
that was electric. So this is his next fight, or like?
Yeah. Damn. So how can you not want to watch what this guy's going to do next? And how can you not be aware of how much pressure he's going to be under? So he was facing an 11-0 fighter. I think he had one no. Okay, to be fair, this guy did have one no contest where he got knocked out badly, and then the guy who knocked him out tested hot for pot. So that knockout loss got turned to a no contest, and he got to keep his undefeated status. So he wasn't undefeated. He just had an undefeated record. You know what? If he got knocked out because the other fighters pot helped him, good for that fighter. I don't think he should turn that into a no contest.
It's just
anyway.
Weed's gonna make you Superman. Is that?
Yeah. Also, you're allowed to test hot for weed up until fight week. You're allowed to smoke weed in training camp. It's really stupid.
Doesn't it last in your system for a long time?
Yep.
So yeah.
So it happens much more regularly than it should.
That's a weak no contest.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's fighting this guy, and he wanted to know what would happen, and what happened was he impressed. He was pretty heavy-handed, but he was, unlike Cosce, who we talked about, he was more patient with his shots. He backed him up against the fence, and he just found the right time to let a bomb go. Caught right, had him hurt badly, looked very close to finishing him. The round ended, and then Wright didn't get a chance to get back into it. He was on the stool. His head was down. He was responding to his corner, but his soul wasn't there. And 30 seconds in, I think Buckley came back out and just stopped him. So really impressive timing, finishing instincts. And the post-fight interview was pretty fun. After that sensational knockout, James Krause, a longtime veteran fighter and coach, gave an interview saying roughly, don't be too impressed with this guy. He's a jerk. He's been kicked out of every gym in St. Louis for going too hard in sparring. Damn. And then in the interview, Buckley was going, look, someone's been talking shit. I'd like to see them January 23rd. Joe Rogan's trying to egg him on. Who's been talking shit? Who's talking shit to you? And he's like, y'all know. And Joe's like, I know, but I know who you're talking about, but will you say it? And he's like, no, I'm not saying his name. And Joe Rogan's like, all right, I'll say his name. His name's James Krause. And then Buckley, called him for the 23rd of January, which is going to be the McGregor card. And James Krause posted on Instagram just a fighter profile shot and just captioned it, "Say my name." And the thing I don't like about this is Buckley's a middleweight and Krause is a welterweight who's fought at lightweight, but he's also fought at middleweight. It was a short notice fight. He took it on 2 days and got robbed by the most incompetent judge whose existence I'm aware of. Oh my God, that's an entire podcast on itself. So he was able to fight against a middleweight, but he got rocked and hurt and outsized pretty badly in that fight. But Buckley did come in about 3 pounds under the middleweight limit. So I'd love them to make that fight. I'd love them to make it at the most fair weight they can. And I hope it happens. Next, we have the prelim headliner, Brandon Moreno versus, his name's not Brandon. I'm just going to say Moreno versus Royval. Moreno was the number 1 flyweight, and he was supposed to fight Alex Perez, who was challenging for the title. Then the guy who Figueredo was supposed to defend his title against pulled out. So they chose to pull Perez out of the matchup, not Moreno. And Moreno, as the number 1 fighter at the time, was pretty pissed about that. But there's nothing he could do. Show up, make a statement, defend his number 1 spot. And that's more or less what happened. He was facing a dangerous guy who's got crazy good submissions. And he took it to the ground at some point. He stayed safe. And then we got to a really weird finishing sequence where Royval, I don't know how, but somewhere in the grappling, dislocated his shoulder. He started screaming in pain because that hurts. And Moreno knew something was up, so he just started throwing, and the ref stopped it with 1 second left in the round, which was kind of unfortunate because Royval wasn't hurt from the punches. He just couldn't defend himself because his shoulder was dislocated.
Yeah.
But 1 second longer of that would not have compromised him. 10 seconds longer of that, honestly, probably wouldn't have compromised him. But if you don't defend yourself, the rules say the ref's supposed to stop it. What's really unfortunate is that a dislocated shoulder can be fixed just like that. And that's exactly what happened when the fight ended. His coach just walked up to him. He braced himself. He knew it was coming, popped his shoulder back in. It's probably happened plenty of times before. So we missed out on this amazing, badass moment where the round ends and the guy gets his shoulder popped back in and then goes out to fight. But Moreno looked great. He definitely took the first round, and nothing I saw makes me think the second or third round would have gone any differently. So take nothing away from his performance. All right, then we get to the main card, which opened up with one of my favorite fighters, Paul Craig, nicknamed the Bear Jew, a 6'4" something Scotsman who entered the UFC on very quickly due to excellent submission skills and has had one of the most memeable UFC careers you can imagine so far. One of his first fights, he lost every minute of the fight, round 1 to round 3, and then with about 30 seconds left, locked up a triangle from the bottom and sunk it in and won the fight with 1 second left by stoppage. So watching him progress through the UFC has been difficult because he has very, very good submission skills, especially off his back or off his top, but he doesn't really have the wrestling skills to get on top. So what he'll do is he'll pull guard and then the guys will beat him up until he finds a submission or does something stupid and gets finished. And that's been pretty much almost every one of his fights so far, except against Shogun, who he was rematching. I don't have enough time to explain Shogun to you, other than saying he's one of the most legendary, iconic fighters mixed martial arts has seen up to date. He's before my time, but everyone who watched him, to know him is to love him, is basically the best way to put it. He was 38 years old, so he doesn't have the speed and timing he had, and he's been doing it for so long that the wear and tear takes a toll. But in their first fight, Craig actually hurt him on the feet, which he's done a couple times now and is clearly getting better at, which you love to see. But he hurt him on the feet, and then in the second and third round went back to pulling guard, and Shogun was just too experienced to fall victim to a submission, and the judges ended up calling it a tie, which kind of felt like the right call. Craig says he took that on 4 weeks' notice, and that was a factor. So it was his fight to lose. Like, if he had lost that fight, it would have been very disappointing, and he didn't disappoint. What he did was he decided, I'm not going to worry about the head kicks. I'm not going to worry about the body kicks. I'm just going to worry about the leg kicks. So he kept his front leg very, very light, just constantly lifting it, tapping it, ready to check any kicks that were coming. I think that confused Shogun a little because he didn't throw any leg kicks. And then Craig started kicking, which again confused him some more. He showed some good grappling, but he got reversed with about a minute and a half left in the first round. But then he went right back to the grappling and got a better wrestling position, got a little finger up his bum in the sequence and made Shogun pay for it. He flattened him out, and the submission specialist started raining ground and pound and made Shogun tap to strikes, which I love to see it. He showed much better fight IQ. He didn't accept a disadvantaged position to look for a submission. He used his wrestling to get himself in good position. He showed good enough striking defense and some pretty decent striking offense. So watching the fight IQ improve, watching the striking improve, watching the wrestling improve is really fun. And if he can bring those all to a next level, then he could actually make an impact in the light heavyweight division, which is pretty wide open right now. So I haven't been this excited to see what's next for Paul. I'm always excited to see what's next for Paul Craig, but I think he's a couple more adjustments, a little more improvement, and this guy might be a serious contender, and I really hope to see it. Next fight on the main card, Ckookagian versus Calvillo. At this point, Eden, my sister, was watching it with me, and I said to her, there's kind of two ways this fight can go. Either Calvillo is going to just grapple her, and it's going to essentially be Calvillo on top in full guard against Ckookagian, who has a pretty high level defensive guard. She's got long legs, so she's able to get her feet up and just kind of hold there. Not great submissions, but like good enough not to take damage and to lose the round, but not be in much danger. I was really dreading that. That's one of the most boring things you can watch for 15 minutes. One of the second most boring things you can watch is an air kickboxing, which is something Ckookagian will often do, where she just circles out, stays at range, throws like 5 strikes at air and lands 1 or 2 in order to avoid getting hit. It works because the women's flyweight division is very new and is still finding its feet. And she's pretty good at that, staying defensive and landing just enough to win, but there's no finishing risk and it's not too exciting. And the way the fight started, I ended up a little wrong, actually. Calvillo wasn't really... she was walking in on a straight line and letting Ckookagian time her, and Ckookagian was landing a lot more than I'm used to seeing, and it got me excited. Calvillo shot for like 1 takedown, which she got, but Ckookagian went right back up to her feet, so I guess that discouraged her because I don't think she shot for another takedown again. And then the second round really picked up. Ckookagian started landing. She had her timing down. It looked like she had this confidence. She was throwing, she was landing. We were seeing swelling. I thought she stumbled Calvillo for a sec. I thought Ckookagian was turning a corner. I was starting to get really impressed. And then the third round, the balloon kind of deflated. To Calvillo's credit, she started angling more. She was using her footwork. She was feinting. And in Ckookagian's corner, her coach told her feint more, which means make her worry about her strike. Make her think you're going to hit her and make her back off. And that's not what Ckookagian did. She just started throwing at air again. And she still took the round, but she really impressed me, especially in the second round. I thought her confidence was growing, and then that deflated in the third round. And I didn't know who won the third round. It was pretty even. So the state of the women's flyweight division is kind of unfortunate right now because there's some talent at the bottom that's rising up, but they've gotten checked a couple times against the veterans. They're not quite there yet. Ckookagian's one of those veterans, and she's kind of at the top of the division, but against Shevchenko, and she was outmatched, and there's nothing that makes me think she could ever beat Shevchenko short of like a horrible injury on Shevchenko's part in the fight. So it's a bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. We'll see what happens next. Next fight was what I wrote. It was a pro versus a meme. Tim Means is kind of like Alan Jouban I was describing earlier. He's a long-time fighter, 500-ish record, win some, lose some. And Mike Perry is a living meme. He's got platinum tattooed above his head. His last interview, he complained for 3 minutes about the IRS taking all his money. And his corner tonight was his pregnant girlfriend, who's like 20 years old, and a guy who crowdfunded to get in the corner so Perry could have a payday or more money and not have to pay any of his purse to his coaches, which he then blew by coming in about 5-6 pounds overweight, which he clearly didn't take seriously. And it was a pro versus a meme. Like, Perry had some moments, I think showing up heavy gave him a strength advantage. He actually out-grappled Means in the first round, who has quite good grappling, and I thought he might actually submit him for a second, but
okay. But didn't he show up heavy because he's eating junk food before the fight?
Yeah.
Isn't that what I saw?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not professional. It's memey. It's not... you kind of love it as a fan, but you hate it as a sports fan, and it's disrespectful. And Means kind of said, hey, fuck you, with his fight. he weathered the first round. He lost it, but then he came out and he made sure not to put his back against the fence again. And he showed a beautiful jab for the next 10 minutes, just nonstop, lit up Perry's face, just again. He'd throw like 1, 2, 3 and just timed him. And like Mike Perry has power, he has strength, but he didn't show great fight IQ. He has knockout power, but he's got to figure out how to land it. And I think to some extent, the longer you're in the sport, the more fighters figure you out. He had a lot of knockouts early, but as we go on, like that's what fighters know to look out for. And that's why I saw it. Like, great job by Tim Means. When someone disrespects you, that's the best thing you can do. You take 30% of their purse and you punch them in the face a couple hundred times. So not an awesome high level fight in terms of like both sides doing great things, but fun fight nonetheless, and the most satisfying conclusion you could ask for probably. So then we get to the title fights. So I've talked about the women's flyweight division twice now. Essentially the state of it is you have Valentina Shevchenko at the top, and you have almost no one up till now. You haven't seen her in a fight where there was a serious chance of her losing. Excuse me. The most competitive fight she'd had to date was against Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the belt, but she'd beaten Joanna 3 times in Muay Thai earlier in their careers, and Joanna's might be my favorite female fighter, but she was just outsized. The striking could have been even, but the strength advantage Shevchenko had let her out grapple her, and the out grappling helped her out strike her a little. And other than that, she's had just dominance in her other 4 fights in this division. So going into this fight, that put her at a minus 2,000 favorite to win. Someone put $12,000 on Valentina Shevchenko to win with a payout of 600. So that was going into that fight. You almost feel like if Maia landed a single punch, you'd be surprised.
Damn.
So it was hard to know what to. You're just expecting such absolute dominance, and the reason for that is because Shevchenko thus far has been better than everyone in the division in every way. She's been a better striker, a better grappler, better fight IQ, better athleticism, and it's just hard to imagine anyone she's fought up till now having any path to victory, except maybe you thought Joanna could outpoint her, but she couldn't for the reasons I outlined. So then what actually happened? First round, Shevchenko struck a little and took her down, held her down, didn't do anything impressive, but won the round pretty decisively. And that would kind of set the tone, except it didn't, because Maia came out and pushed her against the fence and held her in the clinch. And all she did was be stronger than her. She wasn't more technical than her. She didn't do anything impressive, but she got her into a position where she was able to show, hey, I'm actually the stronger woman if I have your back against the fence. And when you have a minus 2,000 fight, that honestly is kind of shocking. So as a commentators were shocked, us as fans were shocked, and I think Shevchenko was a little shocked because what she tried to go for a trip with her back against the fence, and Maia countered it, reversed it, and stayed on top for the rest of the round. So we were in this position where we were like, holy shit, the minus 2,000 favorite just lost a round. What just happened? Is this a fight? And it turned out the answer was no. Shevchenko came out. She went back to the game plan. She outstruck her. She didn't let her back end up against the fence in the same way. She made sure not to end up with her back on the ground. She kept dominating her with like some beautiful clinch trips and takedowns, great top pressure. And yeah, I mean, the next 3 rounds were dominant, but it's just unfortunate the position she's in, because she's a very talented mixed martial artist who's been doing that for 27 years, has an incredibly high fight IQ. There's this hilarious MMA copy pasta about this guy, kind of just simping for her, calling her the most complete human being in the UFC. But it's kind of true. She is really impressive. I think she speaks 4 or 5 languages. So you want to see how good she is, but you can't see that unless you have real tests for her. And Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Ckookagian, Liz Carmouche, Jessica Ai, those are not real tests for her, because they're really, none of those women had any path to victory in the fight against her. There's no finishing risk. There was no real submission risk. There was no athletic advantage. So you like to see dominance. You know you're seeing a special reign, but it's less special when you don't feel like the level of competition is up to task, which is unfortunate. The good news is we kind of got reminded, hey, she's amazing, but she's also human. Like, if you are stronger than her, there's things you can do. If you have a good chin and you can get out of the leg kicks, you can pressure her and make her work and make her uncomfortable. And the good news is the number 1 contender at flyweight right now can do both of those things. Jessica Andrade, who made her flyweight debut coming up from strawweight 6 weeks ago and didn't knock out, but took out Caitlin Ckookagian with a vicious body shot, absolutely should be next in line, because she actually presents some risk. She has knockout power. She might be the stronger woman. She can absolutely pick her up, toss her down, and hold her and punch her. I really hope they make that fight next, because that's the sort of fight that gets me excited. Shevchenko will still be the favorite, and I still expect her to win, but she's going to have to deal with some real risks. So
do you think like the winner of that fight gets a shot at Nunes?
If Andrade wins, they probably almost certainly go to an instant rematch. Shevchenko has lost to Nunes twice. The second fight is considered a robbery by some. It's not a very action-packed fight with clear-cut rounds, but I mean, when you have 2 really dominant fighters and you can't really find a challenge for either of them, that is the logical next course. So yeah, if Shevchenko can get through Andrade, Nunes is kind of the only fight that makes sense. You could make an argument for Weili Zhang depending where she's at, but the strawweight division is actually interesting. So I'm kind of happy to watch Weili defend the belt for a while until she hasn't cleared out the division the way Shevchenko and Nunes have. And that's not a knock on Weili as a fighter. It's a compliment to the strawweight division, because it has a lot more depth and talent than 125 and 135. So just like the way I've been talking nonstop, the card went on for a long time. It was pretty poor timing. The main card started at 10 and it was midnight when Shevchenko fought, and then that was a 25-minute fight. So my sister and I were just ready to go to bed by the time the main fight was coming around. And thank God it was quick.
Yeah, because the NFL last night, like the first, so the Titans-Ravens went to overtime, and then the Packers-Colts went to overtime. And when Mahomes got that touchdown at the end and the Raiders had like one last chance, I was like, please don't kick a field goal. Don't send this to overtime. I can't stay up any longer. I can't do it. I can't stay up that late.
And the worst part about UFC is you can get a finish, like Shogun or Paul Craig finished Shogun, but then they still wait 15-20 minutes to start the next fight. So like and again, this is modeled on like you have 6-7 guys splitting pizza, beer, and pay-per-view costs watching that. And if that's where you're at, you don't mind just like putting on mute and talking shit with the boys for 20 minutes waiting for the next fight. If you're watching it by yourself, though, you kind of struggle to zone in and out. It's easier to stay zoned in. So I was ready to go to sleep, and luckily Figueredo was on the same page. He made it quick, but it was a bit difficult. I'm going to watch the last minute. I'm going to talk you through it, because I don't quite know how to talk about this fight. I'm a bit conflicted, because it was impressive, but it was problematic.
Yeah.
I'm going to count us in and we're going to hit play.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, play. So Figueredo's pressuring. He's got him. He's got his foot at the black line. He's looking to time him. Perez circling nicely. Body shot. Perez gets back center. Nice leg kick. Nice body kick off the leg kick. Figueredo looking for the jab, pressuring a little. Looping overhand. Here we go. Perez starts looking for a takedown. Driving on the single leg. And Figueredo grabs the fence. Keeps him from getting takedown. And then he does it again. Beautiful maneuver to look to a leg lock.
Whoa.
This is why flyweight's fun. Rolling, picks up the guillotine, gets his legs into full guard. That's where you want to be to finish the guillotine. Starts squeezing. Perez is rolling. He's looking to get out of it. Sits up, which you don't do unless you're desperate. And there's the tap.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. That was from rolling onto the leg to switching into the guillotine to the finish. That was beautiful. But that sequence was started by 2 very blatant fouls.
Yeah.
And the problem is we're almost certainly not going to be talking about this like 2 years from now. We're just going to remember, oh yeah, and Figueredo submitted Perez in 2 minutes. So on one hand, that finish doesn't happen without the fence grabs. Without the fence grabs, Perez probably gets that takedown and the fight goes a different direction. On the other hand, the reason that guillotine happened was the squeeze of Figueredo and the excellent jiu-jitsu skills and Perez's inability to deal with it, which has nothing to do with the fence grabs. So if that played out exactly the same, those fence grabs happen, but then Figueredo doesn't look for the guillotine. He rolls away from the takedown. They go back to stand up. 2 minutes later, guillotine plays out without the fence grabs. I'm a lot more comfortable with how it played out, but yeah, a finishing sequence that comes 10 seconds after a blatant foul is kind of hard to accept for me. So, but you know what? What I try and do with evaluating fighters is I look for the patterns. I try not to make one fight stand out. So if this is something we see consistently from Figueredo, that's how I'm going to talk about him, a guy who cheats a lot. If this was an unlucky one-off and he goes on to do his next 3-4 title defenses with the same awesome finishing and no fouls, then I'm probably going to forget about it. And the good news is I might get the first opportunity to do so very quickly. There was some unfortunate news that broke yesterday, that the pay-per-view title fight that's supposed to happen next just got called off, with Petr Yan, the reigning bantamweight champ, having to withdraw, which means there's currently no title fight scheduled for December 12th. And when you have a really quick title defense, one option is get right back in there. And 2 minutes in, Figueredo might be ready to go back in. He's saying it is. And you have a number 1 contender in Moreno, who also just fought on this card, who absolutely deserves the shot, didn't take any damage. So it sounds like that's what they're looking at doing. The big concern is whether Figueredo can make weight. That's something he's struggled with throughout his career. He made weight for this fight, but cutting weight's brutal, and doing it again 3 weeks later is going to be really tough on the body. It sounds like he's said he's game, he's up for it. So we'll see. I'd like to see Figueredo in some deep water. I mean, one reason he's able to get that finish is because he's so strong, and that's why he struggles to cut weight. He has a lot of muscle, and typically fighters like that, you want to see how they fare in the 4th and 5th round, if they can keep it out, or that kind of output only works for them for 3 rounds. So that'll be what I have my eye on if that fight gets made. We'll see. And that was the card.
Thanks for the recap. We'll exit Max's UFC Corner, and we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some basketball. Welcome back to the Sports NextDoor Podcast, and we'll move on next door to the NBA. I mean,
Lots to
since
talk about.
since Wednesday, man, it feels like 2 weeks have gone by with the amount of transaction stuff because that moratorium opened up right after the draft, and like it feels like the draft was so long ago, but it was not even a week ago. And there's plenty to talk about. But I guess, like, where do you want to start?
I don't know. We can start with the Raps, or we can start with the top three. We can start with the top three, and then we can talk about the Raps pick and free agency at the same time, because I think they're somewhat connected.
I have a lot to say on that. So the first overall pick, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Anthony Edwards out of Georgia. And I think that's the best positional fit out of the three picks, top picks that were considered by a bunch of other teams. And a lot of people were wondering if Minnesota was going to possibly trade down or move the pick for like another young superstar to pair with Cat and D'Lo. But I think in the end, like, this is the best positional fit, and I think he has a super high ceiling to go with these two guys. They said after the draft that he's actually grown since the initial measurements, and that's just kind of COVID coming in where they haven't been able to see this guy in person for a really long time. So he's now 6'6" as opposed to 6'5", and 1 inch isn't a lot, but it actually could help him because initially everyone saw him as kind of the 2-guard spot, but I think he could play a bit of 3 as well, especially in this like smaller, more skilled NBA. And he just projects to be like a strong dude. A lot of people were worried about like Andrew Wiggins comparisons because both number 1 picks, right, shooting guards, score the ball really well. But I think just like he has a more NBA ready body at this point. What did you think of the pick?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't really have made sense to go with Wiseman or Ball, considering they've got Russell and Cat, and trading might have made sense if there was a team with some sort of asset they were interested in that who really valued Edwards as a pick. But like you said, Edwards is kind of the best positional fit for them, like a 2-3 player. So I can't think of any team with a more skilled, more ready, similarly high ceilinged 2-3 that they'd want to switch that out for Edwards somehow. So yeah, it kind of made sense then.
The funny thing that stood out to me about this pick, though, is that in his interview, Edwards talked about so he was initially a football player in his like young days, and in high school he's a really highly touted football prospect, and basically said, actually, no, I want to make a ton more money playing in the NBA. And when picked up basketball, but in his interview recently, he still kind of said that football was his favorite sport, which is not what teams want to hear. But I also think it really shows that like the fact that he was able to kind of convert over the basketball and in a couple of years become a number 1 overall pick is that like he has the tools, and there's a lot of research suggesting that like cross training in sports is really great for athletes, like coordination and ability to do different things. So
I value sports IQ a lot too. If you have the ability to play one sport well, I think, and then you have the ability to become the number 1 draft pick in another sport, then I'm going to assume you have a pretty good IQ for both. And that's a huge asset for me. I'd also say the Timberwolves have been there, done that with this type of player. So now they have some experience to draw and look back at Wiggins and say, what did we do well? What did we not do well?
Yeah.
And if that doesn't let them at least reflect and say, okay, here are some mistakes we can avoid, then, well, that would just be horrible on their part, and they don't deserve any success.
Yeah. And then the last thing I got to talk about with the Timberwolves is, like, they just made this pick. It's this shooting guard. And then they go and they give their restricted free agent shooting guard Malik Beasley 4 years, $60 million. And essentially are like, we're going to pay you some big money to come off the bench for us. And I like Beasley. He's a solid player, and I thought it was great that they picked him up in the Nuggets deal way back at the trade deadline. But, I mean, he is facing charges for possession of a firearm and, like, threatening someone on his property with it. And 15 is a lot for someone who you have the rights to and could match a contract that anyone offers him. So I don't know if that was the right call to give your backup shooting guard $15 million when you just selected one with the first overall pick.
Right. Yeah, that would make more sense if they either don't want to start Edwards, which I don't think is the case, or they want him to play 3. But
again, like they have Josh Okogie and Jarrett Culver who could also slot in at one of those guard slots in the starting lineup. So it was a weird decision, and we'll see. Maybe one of those 3 is on the move, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of depth there now, so.
Yeah, you lock up the asset, and then down the line, maybe a team shows interest in Beasley. You can flip him for something. Yeah, I guess that takes us kind of the second overall pick. Golden State Warriors select James Wiseman out of Memphis. Notably 3 games played at Memphis and then had to sit out the season due to some eligibility issues. And again, I mean, when you're this high up in the draft, I appreciate teams swinging for the fences. If you try to stay too safe, like you only get the opportunity to select 1, 2, 3 like very few times in your career.
Unless you're the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, exactly, right? This was a unique opportunity for them to get a player that can continue their dynasty after Steph, Clay, and Dre. That like era is wrapped up. So I really like
that dynasty now, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger news of the night was that Klay Thompson ruptured his Achilles and is done for the year, which is really tough for them. So they're going to actually have to lean on Wiseman a little bit more than they would have liked. But I think he fits great with their system. He has the opportunity to learn a ton from Draymond Green and with Steph and supposedly with Klay, but now they have Jordan Poole as well.
Oubre too as well, right?
Yeah, so there's some shooting around it, and I think he's going to be really successful as like a rim running, super athletic big. And like looking at his highlights when he like dunks the ball, it's ferocious. Like he seems like a super high energy player with a lot of upside.
Yeah, and if you're a team who shoots threes as accurately and well as Golden State, then that's the best thing you can do. Have someone that's going to make the team defense that much more conscious of like what's behind us at the rim at all times. So let's see how much he can force the defense to space the floor.
Yeah. I mean, like even we saw in the finals 2 years ago, it was like they had lost Durant. Klay Thompson was playing on one leg. They had DeMarcus Cousins, who was like a shell of his former self, and it was just
trying to feel good about that win. Don't take too much away from us.
A win's a win. You can never take away the banner. Always flies. But like Steph Curry's a vacuum, right? When he's healthy, you send 2, 3 players to the perimeter, and so it always opens up. Like that was so beautiful to watch, that like Golden State basketball where Curry would come around a screen, float in the air, throw it like an inside pass through the double team to Draymond, and then Draymond, like the opposing team center has to rotate to stop a layup, and he throws an alley-oop to the center, whoever it is, McGee or Looney or Cousins. Probably not Cousins. I don't know if he can even dunk anymore. But like that was just perfection. And I think there's some definite like possibilities of that happening again this year. Like Wiseman's going to be finishing a lot of alley-oops from Green, I think, this year, and I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, with Curry and Green's playmaking and IQ, then they should be able to give Wiseman some good looks, and hopefully Wiseman can pick some of that up. I'm saying hopefully. I don't know if I want to see this. I want to see smart, fun basketball, but I don't want to see a 70-win season and like a 17-game playoff run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but I don't think the Warriors are the top contender coming out of the West.
No.
Yeah. I guess we'll move on to the third overall pick, and probably the one that people have followed the most over the past couple of years. LaMelo Ball goes to the Charlotte Hornets at 3. He played professionally in Lithuania. He played professionally in the Australian Basketball League last year, and so he opted not to go the college route.
What's your takeaway on that?
I think it works out for some guys and it doesn't for others, right? Like you look at Luka Doncic, who, and obviously he's a very special case because he was the MVP of the EuroLeague at 18. And of course he's going to come in and dominate. But there's something to be said about, again, like playing against grown men, right?
Yeah.
I think you'd have a ton that you can learn by playing against those guys. But in college, there's more of like that Americanized system. And if you're playing for a Coach K or a Calipari or like a Izzo or those types of coaches, that they can really draw up an offense to be centered around their stars and adapt. So I think either way, you're kind of in a good situation when you're a prospect of his caliber. But it will be interesting to see because now he's going to basically have to run that Hornets team who is kind of looking for a star to build around.
Right. And I guess 2 thoughts on that. First, from what I understand, one of the knocks on him is that he's like an average athlete, not a special athlete. So playing in the college system, he's going to be exposed and play against like the best athletes in the world, essentially, whereas the Australian and Lithuanian is going to be less of that. So now he's going to have to adapt to that on the fly in the NBA. Just human beings who can do miraculous, remarkable things he's not seen before are going to be the average, not. So he's going to have to adapt to that.
Yeah.
And then 2, like the biggest upside to his game is like his talent and like offensive IQ and ball handling, playmaking. So you're saying like build a team around him, but he like that kind of player doesn't make a lot happen on its own, I don't think. Like the way you have LeBron who can drive, get 4 guys on him and just set, almost guarantee being able to set up an open look 3. They're going to be able to just put 1, maybe 2 guys on him. And if he doesn't have guys who can score really well, then he's probably going to struggle, which I don't know if you want to talk about Hayward now or.
Yeah, well, I want to finish up on LaMelo. Like he's very raw and his playmaking, I think, is the best out of any prospect in this draft. So I'm really high on that. And I think like he has the potential here with his size. Like he's 6'7" and his wingspan is 6'10", which is kind of unusual for someone with that playmaking ability. And like he rebounds really well, and when he's locked in, he can defend really well. And then you look at his brother Lonzo, who when he's playing well could be one of the top like perimeter defenders at the guard position in the league. I just think it's going to take a lot, but his ceiling is so incredibly high at his size and his like basketball pedigree, where his like brother has come from and the teams that he's already played for. Like I think the thing he has to work on the most is, like you said, like he has to become an inside scoring threat in order for him to open up that playmaking. Because right now, like he shot 25% from 3 in the Australian League, and a lot of those were just chucks, and his like mechanics are terrible right now, but I think those can get fixed. And like he shies away from contact, so when he's driving into the lane, he'd rather throw up a floater from the elbow than take a tough layup in traffic. So those are some of the things he needs to work on. But I think the NBA, the way that everyone can shoot it so well and they really spread out the floor, he's going to have a lot of opportunity, almost like a Trae Young, to just like have 5 out, and he's going to go to work and be able to spray the ball all over the court. And I think the Hornets are really exciting. And I think now we can dive in that Hayward signing, while it's like a ridiculous amount of money, and I think like all the other teams are kind of saying, thank God we didn't pay him that much, and Charlotte took that on for us. I think he's a good sort of mentor to put in beside LaMelo because he can provide a little bit of that defense. He can provide a little bit of that playmaking, so it's not all on ball, and he can score the ball a lot better than LaMelo can.
Yeah, it's not, they're obviously not really close to being there yet, but with tempered expectations, that could be really interesting in 3 years. But that's going to really come down to, I mean, the patience of management and the mentality of Ball. Like, can he check himself, stay humble, and like diligently work on everything he needs to work on every year without getting too ahead of himself? I'll be interested to see.
Yeah, I mean, like, they also have PJ Washington, who was their first round pick the year before. That is a decent fit with this backcourt that they have. I mean, obviously they still have Devontae Graham and they still have Terry Rozier. So they
Gut feeling, is Rozier still there when the season starts?
I think yes.
He's got some struggles with Hayward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think like Rozier he was underrated last year because he's on a small market team in Charlotte that doesn't really have any stars, but I think he's got some value for teams out there. So they're going to try and see if they can raise his value this season and maybe flip him for something because obviously they're building for 3-4 years from now.
Yeah, that value might tank though if he's not starting as a point guard.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think their lineup projects to be, you could actually even see Ball coming off the bench until they trade Rozier. So it could be a Rozier, Graham, Hayward starting like 1, 2, 3, and Ball coming off the bench. And then once Rozier gets moved kind of midway through the season, Ball steps into that starting role. You could shelter him a little bit.
I guess the bubble or the lack of fans is almost a blessing in disguise for Charlotte then, because if they did have fans coming in, that there might be an impulse from management to say like, hey, we want to make some money, and the best way to make money is get everyone excited against this Ball guy, so we gotta start him. So I mean, I don't know if you're right or if they're gonna give him the start, but it's kind of nice that that impulse is going to be checked and they don't even have that option available.
Yeah. So that was kind of the first 3 picks. I mean, now we can talk about what the Raptors did at the draft, what the Raptors did at free agency. We're Toronto boys, so obviously that means a lot to us. And so their first round pick was Malachi Flynn, and their second round pick, Jalen Harris. And I mean, I didn't know too much about either of these guys, but from what I read up on them, like Malachi Flynn, San Diego State, Kawhi Leonard, San Diego State alum. But so obviously there's a cultural thing there. I guess you could kind of connect. But I mean, what did you think of the pick, firstly?
Yeah. My first thought was like, man, I feel sorry for this guy because he's following the shoes of Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby as like a late 20s pick. That's a lot of pressure to step into. And then I read up on him too, and it looks like he might be the sort of guy who is exactly fit. I can't remember. Did he take MVP or Defensive Player of the Year?
I think it was Defensive Player of the Year in Mountain West.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people are comparing him to Fred VanVleet, which is reasonable because obviously like it's undersized, light-skinned guards, got the short hair, both like the biggest thing is they both compete at an incredibly high level and they're both winners.
Yeah.
Like Malachi Flynn, I think San Diego State went 29-2 last year. And they lost in the Mountain West Finals, but he takes pride in his defense, his on-ball defense. Like he's got great hands, and then on offense, like he knows how to run a unit. And so if you have Kyle and Fred starting, then Malachi Flynn can come in and run that bench unit and be effective. And I think that's really important because like Kyle and Fred played way too many minutes last season.
Yeah.
So you kind of need that like third playmaking presence when Nick Nurse was relying on Patrick McCaw to run some of their offense last year. So I think that's a really good pick. And Kyle and Fred are going to turn this guy into a stud. I just know.
I'm excited. Yeah, I mean, what I was reading was kind of shocked that the Raptors had this gift fall into their lap, because this could be exactly what they need. And I don't want to get too hyped, put too much pressure, but I'm pretty hopeful.
Yeah.
And everything I'm seeing gives me reason to be optimistic about him.
The biggest worries you have about him as a pick were the same worries that you have about a Kyle and a Fred. And so the fact that he's under their tutelage at this point is going to help him really like mitigate those weaknesses. His undersized, like, you just see how Kyle and Fred, they really like in that series against Jason Tatum, like they get up under his chin and they just sit there like right in his jersey.
Yeah.
And so you can be really effective as an undersized defender if you can get in the grill of some of those players. And obviously, like Kyle and Fred, they take a lot of damage and don't get charged with a ton of fouls for all the like handwork and like how close they guard, because they're smaller and they kind of use that to their advantage.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Jalen Harris. I don't know if there's anything you want to say.
I mean, Jalen Harris, from what I read, he could project to be a bit like a Norm, which, I mean, if he did turn out to be Norm, that's unreal, because I thought Norman Powell, like, he started too many games this year, but I think he could have been a decent shot at Sixth Man of the Year. The way he played, like, his efficiency was up, his scoring was up, and he just overall, like, was making better decisions with the ball this year. So this is like 59th pick in the draft. Obviously, you're just betting on this guy to maybe be a bench player at his peak and maybe provide you some scoring. But like what people loved about Jalen Harris is that he could score at all three levels. So he could score at the rim, he could score in the mid-range, he could score from three. And so if he can provide some of that at the NBA level, like there's always room for more scoring. And I think, again, the culture that the Raptors have of developing guys, especially guards at this point, now that we've seen with a Fred, with a Terrence Davis, with a McCaw, with a DeLon Wright, like he could be just another one in those lines and project to be a little bit like a Norm. And I would love that if it turned out. But like my expectations aren't very high for Jalen Harris.
Yeah.
Because of course he's a late second round pick.
All right. The biggest and bestest news, depending, we got Freddie back.
Yeah. 4 years, $85 million. And a lot of hockey fans are quivering right now because that money just seems out of this world. But in the NBA, like if you look at other guards around, like he's making around Malcolm Brogdon money. And I would say he's a Malcolm Brogdon level. It's kind of just outside of that all-star guard category. But I think if Fred had more usage last year, he could have been considered for, like if Kyle Lowry wasn't there, I think VanVleet could have been considered as a all-star candidate. So I like the money.
My first reaction was honestly shock because from what I understood, Fred was saying like, I want to get paid. And I thought there would be at least one team willing to take the risk and give him that all-star payday. So Phoenix was one name that was being tossed around and they went with Chris Paul. So I guess that got turned out. Yeah. The Knicks were another name. I think he's from Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chicago Bulls seemed possible. Yeah. I guess they have White though. So
yeah.
And
Detroit was the last one there. And then they took Killian Hayes with the 9th pick. So that was kind of a big deal for them. And I just don't really know what Detroit's doing. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think the really like thing that I loved about this deal is that it's front loaded in this first year. So he's going to make a little bit more than that. What is it? 21 per year. He's going to make more than that this year. And because they're playing in Tampa Bay this year, less taxes for my boy Freddie. So the taxes get charged on where you play your home games. And so since they're playing in Tampa Bay, my boy's going to make a lot more money than he would be playing north of the border here in Toronto. So that's nice. And then, of course, that second year and third and fourth year are going to be a little bit less. And that's obviously because they're trying to create space for Giannis. So I think that the deal is great because they maintain that cap space next year, but they get Freddie at a great number. And I think I don't know if any of the other teams were willing to go that high. I think just the Raptors value him a lot higher than the other teams in the league, and deservedly so. He's been incredible for us the last 2 seasons.
And hey, he wants to win, and the Raptors are a place where he knows he can win. So I'm happy. I remember I've heard somewhere that like a good deal leaves both sides a little unhappy. I think this is the opposite. I think we managed to get Freddie at a price where we don't have to give up on that 2021 free agent race, and Freddie's going to get paid, and we are a better team for it, which both sides are happy. We got a chance to win. So
I love it.
I didn't think it was going to happen. It happened. I mean, hey, he led us in scoring in the playoffs. Like, you kind of want to re-sign that. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll transition to some more upsetting news, as basically both of our big men made their way to Los Angeles. Serge Ibaka, 2 years, $19 million with the Los Angeles Clippers. The second year, I believe, is a player option. And then Marc Gasol, 2 years at the veteran minimum to the Lakers. And I mean, I kind of saw the Gasol one coming as soon as those rumors started circling, and the Lakers said they had interest. And I mean, when they signed, we'll get to it later, when they signed Montrezl Harrell, I was thinking, wow, like, I don't know if they're going to have room for Gasol, but they come in, they pitch him the beauty of raising his kids in Los Angeles. They pitch him the defending champions, right? Like, he wants to win. That's what the point of his career is. And so I think it's a great signing for the Lakers because he can defend and doesn't have to be out on the perimeter, because that's what Davis can handle. But he can basically be a big body in the paint and just continue to keep that theme of that Lakers like length and being everywhere. And on offense, like, it's incredible what he can do on offense. People really like undervalue what he brings, but JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, all they would do is rebound and rim run and foul. But Mark, you can spread him out and have him shoot, or he can catch it and go high-low and give it to AD in the post and be a potent enough threat so that if you have JaVale McGee in that like dunking spot, his player's not going to go over and double team Davis and really clog up the paint. So I think this is a really great pickup for the Lakers. What do you think about Gasol?
Yeah, I mean, the dialogue I've had going on internally with the free agency and just the Raptors moved is like, how micro macro should we be analyzing their season? Like, you could get as micro as, let's look at game 7 against the Celtics and say what went wrong there and let's fix that, because if they had won that game, we'd be thinking differently about the Raptors than we're thinking now. Or you could look at the overall trends of the season. I don't really think that's what management did. I think they decided their number one priority is that 2021 off season, and it was the 2 years that got Ibaka and Gasol to sign away.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. I really liked it because they had such similar strengths. Their rebounding, their passing, their 3-point shooting, their defense. One of them could be having a bad game and you could pretty reliably go to the other one.
Yeah.
It didn't quite work out for us in the playoffs, but I really liked that system we had, and giving up on it sucks. But we'll see.
I think this and that kind of leads into the Serge signing. Like, I think we could have kept one or both, but just the money didn't fit with our timeline. And I think Serge recognized that not a lot of teams have a ton of cap space this year. So he goes 2 years with the Clippers. One of those is a player option that he'll probably opt out of. So he basically gets a 1-year run here with that Clippers team, who are starting to tinker with their lineup. They traded for Luke Kennard. They got rid of, or they lost Harrell to free agency, which was very shocking, but They pick up Serge, who I think is an upgrade over Harrell because of the experience that he brings. He's a little bit bigger and plays a little bit better defense, and like he can shoot the heck out of the ball. And so I think that's something that the Clippers are going to love having with Serge. And pretty inexpensive for what he got, but he's going to play this 1 year ring chase, do his thing. And then I think next year in this 21 free agency class, when all the teams have a ton of cap space, he's going to cash out and get a longer term deal.
Yeah, I think he made the best decision for himself. The Raptors made the best decision for themselves. And that brings us to what that decision is. Let's talk a little more specifically about it. They're going to try and keep what worked. They're saying, we believe in this team. We believe in Freddie. We believe in Kyle. We believe in the growth of Pascal and OG. But we also, we want to keep our option open for 2021.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how that's going to play out. I'm looking around at the East and I'm a little scared.
Well, I mean, the Raptors lose their centers and everyone was kind of scrambling thinking, oh, what's going to happen? And I think the move they made to get Aron Baynes 2 years at $14 million, and again, hockey fans, terrified of that number. But again, to put it in perspective, that's like third line center money. That's fourth line, like there's nothing in basketball.
We spent like 3-4 months negotiating with Nylander to get him at like around 7-8 million.
Yeah. And then Aron Baynes takes it, and he's obviously
he might be our starting center.
He will be, I think, and he won't be as good as Serge and Mark, but he does a lot of great things, and I think underrated. Like, he fits in so well with this Raptors team. He shot 35% from three last season on like 4 attempts per game. So he already, I mean, Marc Gasol shot around 40%, but a lot of us were sitting there watching those threes halftime and was like, please, Mark, don't ever shoot. Because it felt like they never went in. But Aron Baynes, like, he made 9 threes in a game last season and was taking, like, step-back heat check threes in that game. So he can light it up. So, again, like, and then I think him and Kyle are going to love each other. Kyle makes all of his centers that he plays with better because of the spacing he can create off the dribble in the pick and roll. And Aron Baynes is one of the best illegal screen setters getting away with it in the NBA. And like, he's a tough dude. He's been memed because he has like the most receiving end of posters ever. There's a video outlining it. But honestly, I love that because it means that even though he's been dunked on 3-4 times, he's going to go back up there and contest it the next time.
Yeah,
right? He's not going to back down. So he rebounds well. He actually is underrated at passing the ball. And so I think we're going to love to see something like he might throw some backdoor passes to a Pascal cutting or an OG cutting. I think Raps fans are going to love that. And then he screens well and he plays like strong, big body defense. I saw a super cut yesterday on Twitter of Baynes 2 years ago on the Celtics. And it was basically Norm Powell there's like a minute of Norm Powell driving at him in this one game they played. And he was straight up the whole time. And Norm like didn't score at all. It was just Norm taking it right at him, and he just contested every single layup, and Powell was missing. So,
see, again, what I'm worried about is he's 6'8", and that's going to work out well against some teams, but I think we're going to match up against some teams with like a tall lineup, and we're going to struggle on defense.
Yeah.
Like you saw against the Celtics, sometimes we were running OG at the 5 on D, and that worked against Tice.
Yeah.
But if we're up against like, I don't know, a Karl Anthony Towns or Bam Adebayo, I don't know how we're going to defend against those guys.
Well, so and that's up to Nick Nurse, right? And I trust him. Like, I think Baynes will be the starting center for most games, but I think we might close a lot of games with the Pascal or OG at the 5 because that's like the skill lineup. And I'm okay with that because I know they can draw up some schemes where they're double teaming guys in the post or just hedging guys when they're trying to run for alley-oops. Like, the Raptors are going to struggle to rebound. But, I mean, I guess some of that could be solved by their re-signing of Chris Boucher, who needs to eat his Wheaties, get in the gym, put on some pounds, because, I mean, his Instagram name's Slim Duck for a reason, but the dude's a stick figure. And I think there's actually a good contrast here with Boucher and Baynes, because Baynes is kind of this like boulder who's going to move dudes, and Boucher is a little bit smaller, but he's faster running down towards the rim. He can catch a ton of stuff, super athletic, catching lobs, and then he can step outside and shoot the three, which I think we'll see him do a lot more of this season. He'll have a little bit more freedom to do that. And I mean, like, he was a G League MVP, so hopefully there's a higher ceiling for Boucher to really like take off and step into this backup center role, and in 5-6 minutes at a time could guard a bigger center, because he may not be strong right now, but he has that length, and he could grow into a fuller body and just be more of like a defensive specialist.
Yeah, there's Nick Nurse has absolutely earned our trust, and I am excited to see how he can move those pieces into the most optimal way, because there probably is a way to take advantage of Boucher's length, OG's defense IQ, and Baynes' solidness, and give any center in the league a lot of trouble.
Is there anything left in free agency that you kind of see that you want the Raptors to do, or that they kind of need to get done? Check another thing off the bucket list.
I guess the only thing is I'm not sure what's up with Terrence Davis. I don't know when the charges are going to be resolved. That you can't really count on that. I don't know enough about it to comment on the likelihood of him playing this season. If he's not, that's a hole on our team that I'd rather have filled than not, but I don't think there's a lot left in free agency we can do about it.
Yeah, I think we're pretty deep at guard at this point. I'd like to see a bit more depth at the big position still. Like, we have Baynes, we have Boucher, we have Pascal, we have OG, who can all operate in that 3-4-5 range. But like, after that, it gets pretty shallow. You've got the Stanimal, who's goated for that one game he had in the bubble, but besides that, absolute bum. And then you've got Patrick McCaw, who at this point, like, is a guard. You've got DeJuan Hernandez, last year's second-round pick, who I haven't seen enough from him. Like, hopefully he gets better, but I'm not counting on him for real minutes. And besides that, and then like, Paul Watson's on a 2-way contract, and again, like, he's going to spend most of his time in the G League. So I think they just kind of need one more big to fill that hole in the roster. Someone who can come off the bench and give you like a reliable 10 minutes of defense and maybe some shooting.
Do you have any names in the free agent pool that come to mind?
I mean, nothing really stands out because there's like not much left, but I mean, I could see, there's not much. I guess they could re-sign Hollis Jefferson, which I wouldn't mind, because he gave us some good stuff off the bench last year. Besides that, like, a lot of the big men who are on the board have been signed. As we're doing the podcast right now, Markieff Morris just signed a 1-year deal to return to the Lakers. So
yeah, I heard him being tossed around this morning with potential.
Yeah,
but
I'm happy about that. He seems a bit like a vacuum for the basketball. Like, both the Morris twins, they don't turn away open shots for a better shot. They take the shot themselves. It's just a bit of a ball stopper. And
it's not what we want on the Raps.
Exactly. We want people who can move the ball around. So I mean, I don't know what's going to fill that role, and I'm not exactly sure of who's still out there, but I think they just got to get one more guy who isn't DeJuan Hernandez or Stanley Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah, that fair enough. I don't know. Maybe they can move a draft pick in a trade.
Yeah.
I guess so. Then the last question I'd have for you is, how do you like our chances this season as is?
Oh man, I mean, like the East has gotten better, which is unfortunate, but also you could see happening. So I like Milwaukee's up there, right? They're always going to be up there. They have Giannis, and they just made that move for Drew Holiday. Absolute debacle with Bogdan Bogdanovic, and they don't end up with him, which is actually, I'm not complaining too much because that could mean Giannis leaves. And then you've got the Nets, of course, with KD, Kyrie. They're in the James Harden sweepstakes if he gets moved, and they re-signed Joe Harris, so obviously they're going to be a contender. Philadelphia, I loved what they did. Daryl Morey's just so smart. Coming over from Houston, new GM, he already got rid of Al Horford's contract, added some shooting, some young shooting around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. So they drafted Tyrese Maxey. They drafted Isaiah Joe. They acquired, I can't even remember anymore who it was. That's fine. They traded away. They got Seth Curry in that deal for Josh Richardson. So they just they added more shooting around those two guys. And I think that's really going to help them perform next season. So I think Philadelphia's up there. Boston's just getting better. They signed Tristan Thompson, which is basically an upgrade over Tice.
Yeah.
So I see the Raptors, they kind of fall into that 3 to 6 seed in the playoffs because I still think they're better than the majority of the East. But the top of the East continues to get better.
Yeah, and that's kind of the decision. I mean, I don't think there really were any big moves available to give us a real serious shot at the number one contender in the East position this year. We'll have that opportunity next year. OG's might be my favorite player on the Raptors. So I'm really hopeful to see him continue to get better and make the kind of leap we've seen Siakam make. If something like that can happen, especially if we can re-sign him or give him an extension before that leap happens, we're in amazing footing. But it's tough. You have to wait and see what we got. But the quicker you can decide, okay, I like what we got, we don't have to tear anything down, let's go with it, then the better position we're in. But if we lock in too early, we could doom ourselves for the next 5 years. And the other issue is, I don't know how, I think of Lowry as the heart, the engine of this team. And I don't know how many more years he can be that for. The way he plays defense you were talking about earlier, and the number of minutes he logs, that's not, or there's some serious injury potential there as you get. He's 34 now. I don't know when you can reasonably expect some drop off in performance. So as much as I want to say okay, I like what we've got, we're building, we're improving, we're getting better every year, the engine of our team has a not too far away expiration date on his status of that, and I don't really know how the team functions without him. So
my ideal scenario is Lowry comes back, he's going to retire after. He comes back on lower money, and Fred kind of takes over that role of the starting point guard, heart of the team, but Lowry's still on the team. We got enough money to get a superstar, and maybe it's not Giannis, but maybe it's Kawhi if he leaves the Clippers, or maybe it's, I don't know, Paul George, but maybe not because I don't want Pandemic P. But a big name free agent who's out there, and Lowry stays because obviously people love playing with him and hate playing against him, and so he's an attractive piece for any free agent who's coming to Toronto. But you kind of have Fred slowly taking over that role of the starting point guard.
And Malachi, hopefully.
Yeah. Ideally, I mean, I see, because Fred's now, he's going in his 5th year. So there is that time that it takes to really develop. So I don't see Malachi doing anything super special until maybe his 3rd season.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm looking at what Siakam and OG have been able to do, and I'm judging Malachi more on that than Fred.
Yeah.
Or I'm basing my expectations on that. Yeah, I think you're right. Like the Kawhi was the key piece of like that made the team its best, and we're missing that superstar level consistency right now. And like it's such a weird team because Lowry, Siakam, and Van Fleet can all be that superstar at any given moment, but not reliably or consistently enough to bank on, especially in the improving East we just talked about.
You hope Siakam can make that leap, but if not, he's probably your best like number 2 option.
Yeah, just watching the Celtics series, like he very much, you saw what a superstar looked like in Tatum, and you saw the contrast in what Siakam was and wasn't able to do. Yeah. And hey, best case, maybe his takeaway is the exact same, and he's been spending this off season and he's just at that mentality. I hope he feels like the number 2 power forward in the East, right? Well, not including Giannis, obviously, but I hope he's got a little more dog in him, and I mean, everything he's done so far has been great. Yeah. I hope to see him get even greater, but I don't know. I'm nervous about how much time we have left with Lowry and what he's going to want to do when his contract expires, because I don't know if the team clicks without him.
If there's one thing I know, though, you gotta have faith in Masai. He's our leader. He has made all the right moves up until this point, so I trust where he's going with the direction of the team, and if Lowry has to go, you would hope that the culture that's been established for the last 8-9 years that he's been here is one of winning and one of hard work and excellence that like all the new players coming to the team really buy into, and that comes from the top. Like Masai works endless hours every day, and he's probably, if not one of the best general managers in the league, or president of basketball operations, as Bobby Webster holds the GM role. But I mean, that's got to be my key takeaway, is that despite losing Serge, despite losing Gasol, we get Fred, we get Malachi Flynn and Jalen Harris, which like could end up being a pretty solid bench guard duo, and we end up with Aron Baynes, who's an underrated great pickup, and we re-signed Boucher for great money. Like, I just think they make value moves, and they make moves with the long term in mind. And so overall, I'm feeling pretty happy. And maybe this season isn't going to be the best, but like I'm super excited for what this Raptors team shows us this year, and I'm super excited for like 2021 and beyond.
I'm gonna stay a little more pessimistic than you, but also hopeful. We'll see what the season looks like.
All right, I think that's gonna wrap up all the time we have for this one, but next time we'll dive into some free agency, take a look at the East, take a look at the West, what moves we liked, what moves we didn't like, Detroit. Yeah, it's good to talk to you, buddy. And
yeah, you too.
see you
Looking
next
forward
time.
to it. See you next time.